Today, we're joined by Trey Selman from the RV Safety Education Foundation to talk about a topic that's essential for both new and seasoned RV owners, RV towing safety. We'll cover some of the most frequently asked questions to help people make safe, informed decisions. Let's dive in. What are the key safety concerns when towing an RV trailer?
Well, Emily, thank you very much for your invitation to come and talk to you all about this. We do a lot of work with the RV owners, and when we focus on RV safety or towing safety, where the first thing that comes to mind is braking distance.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of look at things from a safety standpoint. And so we also look at mechanical and all the other things that go in there, but our primary focus is that safety concern. So braking distance is a big deal. When we get a bigger vehicle, and a lot of RV owners are not used to having larger vehicles. It's longer, it's taller, and it's heavier.
Mm-hmm.
And braking distance is that number one concern that we start to look at. Then the next thing with regards to towing safety is the effect of adding that weight onto the motorized vehicle. And there are a lot of motorized vehicles that we could use, but I'm just going to use the word truck today as we talk, right? So it's an easier thing. Most of the time, we're talking about trucks, pickup trucks or something like that. So I'm going to use the word truck. But when we, depending on the type of RV trailer, when we add that weight onto the truck, we can have some different effects happen to that truck. So that's a concern. That's something that we have to be aware of. What is that going to do? And then the last thing is unique to trailers is sway. And sway is when that trailer, some condition, usually it's a gust of wind or heavy wind or a big truck passing by, something like that, can cause the trailer to move back there, and it can kind of oscillate, right? And so usually it comes back into line, and that's what it should do. I mean, it probably oscillate just a little bit, but if it starts oscillating and it doesn't get back in line, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
That's we call the tail wagging the dog, right? So we don't want to see that because then we can lose control. So there are things that can help to mitigate that, to reduce that, and so we want to be aware of some of those things. So just real quickly, the first thing is to make sure we've loaded our trailer properly. Loading the trailer in a proper way with a proper tongue weight. We can talk about that later, but a proper tongue weight helps to reduce that. Another thing that can affect sway is the faster we go, the more possible sway can happen. So reducing speed helps to reduce sway. I always think about driving through Nebraska or Wyoming with the big open plains, and there's a lot of wind out there. They shut down the highways for wind, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so they've got gates that'll just shut down the highway because of wind dangers. And so they also, when you go into a state like Nebraska, they'll have the new speed limit signs, right? Whenever you go into a new state, that happens. And so they'll say vehicles towing trailers have a reduced speed. And it's not because they don't like us. I'm an RV trailer owner, and so I do that. It's not that they don't like us. They know the conditions that can happen in that state. And they know what can happen when high winds or gusty winds can, what it can do to an RV trailer. Because it's a big trailer with a big sail, basically, is what it is, and it catches that wind. And so that's that's a big thing that we want to be aware of and mitigate those things. Then there's pieces of equipment that we can also add to help mitigate sway.
What's the difference between the types of RVs?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's motorized RVs, but we're talking today about towing, so we're talking focusing on the RV trailers. And before I go into the two main differences, there's one real important similarity that we want to discuss because it gets confusing when new RV trailer owners who've never towed trailers before, when they start getting into the terminology, it kind of gets a little bit confusing. So the first thing is to understand that there's two kinds of trailers in the world. Okay, one is called a full trailer. And that's a trailer that we don't see a lot, but think about I like to use a lot of childhood or playground
Yeah.
physics, right?
Yeah.
So seesaws and this would be like a wagon, right? So
Okay.
a wagon is a type of trailer. It's a full trailer where we have the full weight is on the frame of the trailer, but the front axle and the rear axle are separated. And so all of that weight gets transferred to the ground through the axles of the trailer. But RV trailers aren't like that. They're not full trailers. Full RV trailer is a semi-trailer. And what that means is that you've got the axles are moved back a little bit, right? And so a portion of the weight is on the axles, a big portion, usually 75 to 90% of the weight of the trailer is on the axles. But then there's a little bit of weight that gets loaded onto the tow vehicle or the pickup truck whenever we attach it. And that's called tongue weight or pin weight, right? And so that's an important thing to understand is that it's still the full weight of the trailer. All of the frame is carrying that weight, but a big portion of that weight is on those axles, but a little bit is added to the truck. And so when we add that weight, like we talked about earlier, that's when we can have some issues that we need to be aware of. So I know that's the first part to the answer. The second part is there are two types of RV trailers when we break that down. The first one is a conventional trailer. Sometimes we call it a bumper pull trailer because it's attached to the very back of the pickup truck, right? And so most of the time nowadays it's not on the bumper. It used to be where you put the ball on the bumper, and that still happens on some real small vehicles. But a lot of times there's a receiver hitch. It's a square tube in the back, but it's still in the back. And so there's some unique characteristics. When we put that pivot point on the very back of the trailer, that's when trailer sway is a little bit more probable. So that's one of the issues with regards to conventional trailers. And then also, because we put it on the back, we're back to playground physics, and we're on the seesaws now, right? That rear axle of the trailer, a lot of that weight goes down on it, but it also becomes the fulcrum of that seesaw. And so we can offload the front axle of the trailer. And so that can be an issue. If we put too much back there, maneuverability can be an issue. So we need to be able to be aware of that. And so we can talk a little bit more about hitches, but there are some hitches that can help to deal with that. The second type of RV trailer is when we get to bigger trailers. Conventional trailers are bumper pull, if you want to use that term. Those are on relatively small trailers. Then we move to the bigger trailers, and we need to change the hitching dynamics there a little bit so we don't have a lot of offloading. So what we do is we move that pivot point to more it's called the neutral point of the vehicle, but it's just closer to the middle of the vehicle. It's really right over the back axle, or just in front of the back axle is a perfect place to put that pivot point. And we call those fifth wheel hitches. So we have a different type of hitching mechanism because it's heavier. The pin weight or the tongue weight or it's really pin weight when we go to a fifth wheel hitch, is much heavier. And so we have fifth wheel hitches that go in the back of the bed of the pickup. So the frames of RV trailers are built with fifth wheel hitches in mind with this heavier tongue weight. And so the difference with the fifth wheel hitch is that it's got a platform that tongue weight kind of sits on, and it helps distribute it with some of the weight of that fifth wheel hitch. And then the way it's connected is a little bit different. There's a cylindrical pin that comes down with a little groove in it. And instead of it just a little coupler sitting on top of a ball, which is what happens on the conventional hitches, this has, it's a much more secure connection. And it has, the fifth wheel hitch has jaws that wrap around that hitch. And so it's a very secure connection. So it helps distribute the weight of the pin on that fifth wheel hitch. And then it also has a very secure connection. And then it also helps with the offloading of the truck. You don't really see that. And then the consequence of that too, a good consequence, is that trailer sway is usually not a problem at all with fifth wheel hitches.
So is it like greatly reduced with fifth wheels as compared to like travel trailers?
Yeah. That's a great understanding. Hopefully I explained it, but it is greatly reduced where you really just don't even have an issue with sway. There's always an exception out there, right? But it's really not something that happens much with fifth wheel hitches. And then the stability of that heavier pin weight is all, and the frame of the trailer. That's important too, because RV trailers are built with fifth wheel hitches in mind.
Oh, that's true.
Right.
They're pretty cool too.
Yeah, they are cool.
Yeah.
So those are some of the similarities, important similarities and differences.
So where should potential RV owners start when starting to navigate the process of like getting their setup started?
The first place to start is terminology. That's kind of true with anything that we study new, right?
Yep.
Is you really have to understand the terms. And there's a lot of mnemonics. And there's not time for our interview to be able to go through all those. But there's a lot of mnemonics and a lot of terminology. And there's a lot of confusion out there sometimes because different organizations will sometimes use the terms differently or different terms to say the same thing. So we try to give those similar terms, but we want to help people really understand them. One of the biggest places of confusion with terminology that I've seen is in legal documents, like state statutes and stuff, when they start talking about transportation code. And I'm not trying to jump off anything, but they'll actually get the terms wrong, right?
Yep.
They'll use the wrong term or the wrong definition for that term. And so it helps to really make sure we understand those terms. Then beyond that, there's really three that kind of stick out in my mind. And without going into all the full definitions of those, I just want to talk a little bit about how they affect the truck. We talked about the weight on the truck and how those things get affected. And so when we're talking about towing, a lot of the focus goes on the tow vehicle because that's the one that's doing all the work, right? It's got to move all that mass of two loaded vehicles with people and stuff and water and equipment, all of that around the country, through the wind, over the mountains, down the mountains, all kinds of places, right? And so it's got to move that mass and it's got to be able to do that well without causing damage to the tow vehicle. So there's one rating that the manufacturers do that kind of focuses on that for the combination vehicle. A combination vehicle is a truck and a trailer attached together, right? And so it focuses on moving that mass around without the truck overheating the engine, the transmission, all the drivetrain components, right? And so that's an important concept to be aware of. We don't want to do that. And so there's a rating for that. Then the next two ratings focus on the weight that gets loaded on the truck. One is just the overall truck.
Yep.
It can only have so much weight on it. And so we need to be aware of that. Actually, every vehicle can only have so much weight. The trailer can only have so much weight on it too. We're not really talking about that today, but it's really hard for me to pass up that.
Well, honestly, it makes me like envision the clown cars where you have like all the clowns coming. You're like, that's not possible. And really, it's not. So
and it's hard for us, especially as new RV owners, because these RVs that are made are so phenomenal. I mean, they feel like home. Yeah. I mean, they're a little smaller and depending on the kind that you get, but some of them they're really nice inside. And so, and they're wonderful. I mean, it's just a great country that we live in for a lot of reasons, wonderful place to live, to be able to do all this kind of stuff and to see the things that are out there. But sorry, I'm digressing a little bit. Those are just things that are important to us about is to really enjoy RVing, but to do it safely. Then the second thing is another one, the weight going on the rear axle, because we've already talked about that's where we hitch up the truck, whether it's on the bumper, on the back, or whether it's right over the rear axle. A lot of that weight goes on the rear axle. So there's a rating that talks about axle weights. And that's true on the RV trailer as well. So we just want to be aware of that, and like I was alluding to on that RV trailer, just for a second to diverge just a little bit, is that because those trailers look so much like home, we have a tendency to think of them that way. And we don't realize that they have weight ratings too. The axles have weight ratings, the frame has, all of theirs have weight ratings, and we can only put so much stuff in there. And I know RV manufacturers try to put storage in a lot of places, but just because we have a lot of storage space, that's not really what measures how much we can put in the RV, it's weight. So we do need to be aware of weight and what we load in the RV and how we load the RV. So that's kind of the most important places to start. Everything about safe towing revolves around weight. And so that's important. And then of course the equipment that handles that weight.
What are some common challenges that RV owners face while towing?
Well, probably the biggest challenge is matching the truck to the trailer. Again, there's a lot of confusion out there. Nobody intends for it to be, but but it's always a new area. Like we talked about the new area of study where we have terminology. When we're looking at the tow vehicles, we need to understand to properly match that. And there's a concept. It's not a hard concept to get, really. The bigger the trailer you want, the bigger the tow vehicle you need, right? I mean, that's just a simple concept. But a lot of us want that big trailer with all that extra room to be able to enjoy, but we don't want a big tow vehicle to be able to tow it. And those two things just don't work. So we need to understand that there are limitations. There's a lot of freedoms that we have in this country, but those freedoms do have limitations, and this is one of them. So we need to understand that matching a truck and a trailer is a little bit of a process. We need to understand the dynamics that go along with that. Some of the things that we're talking about in general today, there are more details, obviously, in a class that we have, we can do. But that's the biggest one, and trying to overcome that. So we have expectations, right? And we want to have it a certain way. And sometimes we just have to understand that there are concessions whenever we do that. So the big deal is matching that truck and a trailer. But we have big, different size trucks. That's another beauty of this country. If you want a bigger trailer, they do have bigger trucks. Now they are dualies, they have dual rear wheel trucks, but they're designed to carry more weight. That's why we have extra tires in the back and heavier axles on them, heavier frames to carry more weight. So we just need to be aware of when we need to make those changes. But one of the things that's tricky when it comes to, just to kind of give a little bit of the tricky part of matching a truck to a trailer, the truck manufacturers or the motorized vehicle manufacturers, they try to help with this. And bless their hearts, many times that help it's correct. They're not saying things wrong, but we need to understand whenever they're talking about towing, they're talking about towing in general, not just towing RV trailers. There's a lot of other kinds of trailers. There's boat trailers and flatbed trailers and gooseneck trailers and agricultural trailers and just all kinds of different trailers that are out there. And so we need to be aware of those changes. And one of the things that's changed in recent years is that a lot of the truck manufacturers have beefed up that drivetrain part, right? The engines are much more powerful and the transmissions are matching that. And then the rest of the drivetrain all takes care of helping move that mass around. In a lot of ways, the amount of weight that can be loaded onto the trailer hasn't changed that much. And so while they might be able to move more weight around, they can't have more weight loaded on the whole vehicle or even the rear axle. And that's where the gotchas can happen. Because sometimes when we look at those ratings that we talked about, the one of the combination vehicle, it might be able to do a lot more, but that's a trailer with a smaller tongue weight or a smaller pin weight. And RV trailers already come with a lot of equipment on top of them, and then we throw all our stuff inside, right? And the stuff that makes it living. And so usually tongue weights and pin weights are a little bit higher. And so what a single rear wheel truck might be able to do with a flatbed trailer, when you can load, it doesn't have anything in it, right? You just put some stuff on it for work, or a boat maybe. When you start doing an RV trailer, that tongue weight or pin weight gets a little bit higher, and it really pushes you to kind of need more of a dual rear wheel truck in a lot of instances. And so that's where I usually make the enemies. The old thing about preachers is they comfort the afflicted, but they afflict the comforted. So I kind of do that sometimes. So I kind of make, sometimes when I talk about those things, I kind of make enemies about that. But I'm not trying to make enemies. We just want to try to make it safe for everyone and understand that. So it's really trying to analyze that and look at what you want, what you need to be able to accomplish what you want.
So really get a good understanding of the building blocks for everything and learn terminology so that they're informed and can make the safe decisions on getting the truck and getting the trailer and making sure they actually fit together and match and they do all the things that they want to do.
Right. Look at the trailer, see how big it is, how much it can be loaded to. Really, we like to look at that because we're Americans, like we were talking about. If there's a place for us to put stuff, we're going to put it there.
Exactly.
Right? So we usually load those trailers up to pretty much their capacity a lot of times, Sometimes we go over them. Unfortunately, we
Yeah.
know we weigh RVs a lot, and so we know how much that happens. It does happen more frequently than we'd like to see. But so we need to think about how much can that trailer hold, based on what the RV manufacturer tells us, and then what kind of truck would be needed to be able to move that mass, to handle the pin weight, to do all those things that are necessary.
So can you explain tongue weight and pin weight and how they're measured?
Yeah, we mentioned it and tried to describe it,
Yeah.
so that it can be a little bit more understandable. But we do want to measure that. We do need to see what that is, especially when it comes to sway. We've talked about sway because one of the things I mentioned when I talked about sway, especially for the conventional trailers, is that properly loading the trailer, having the right amount of tongue weight, which is a minimum of 10% of the weight of the trailer, is important. That's a big deterrent to prevent sway, and so that's really important to help us understand that. So there are CAT scales at truck stops, and they're big vehicle scales, and those are perfect for doing this because we don't need real detailed information. We need a little bit. We need to understand what's going on. So the simple way to measure tongue weight is to go to a CAT scale. Have your truck and trailer loaded up with all the people in it and all your stuff and everything. We like to see it as it goes down the road because, unloaded vehicle weights don't really mean a lot. I mean, these trailers aren't designed to be loaded, to be towed empty.
Yeah,
right?
only if they're going to use them empty, right?
Exactly. They're recreation vehicles. That means we've got to do the stuff in them, right?
Yeah.
We're going to live in them. And so we have stuff in them. So we want to have them loaded up when we go. So go to the truck stop. They have apps now that you can use. You don't even have to go inside anymore. You can use the CAT scale app, and it only costs about $15, at least right now at this time. It's very inexpensive to get that done. And many times you can even do a reweigh within a certain amount of time for little to no cost. Sometimes they don't charge you at all. Maybe it'll a couple extra bucks. But even if you have to pay again, it's not very expensive. But you will need to pass over that scale 2 times in order to get the tongue weight. And unfortunately, as we wondered in school, you will have to do a little bit of math, right? So there is a little bit of math that has to be done. But the simplest way to do it is to put there are different platforms on a CAT scale. You put the truck on one platform and the trailer on the other platform. And so that gets our hitched truck weight and the trailer axle weights. So we're getting that weight that's on the trailer axles. So then you're going to pull off the scale. You don't want to do this on the scale. You don't be disconnecting your trailer on the scale. That could block up the scale, and we don't want to do that for other people that need to use it. So pull around to the parking lot in the truck stop, park it, disconnect your truck, bring the truck back around, and get the truck unhitched weight. Now, the only thing that's changed between the truck hitched and the truck unhitched is the tongue weight or the pin weight, right? Yeah, it's not hard. So what we just do is we take the difference between those 2 truck weights, right? And the difference between those 2 is our tongue weight or pin weight. And now we add that to the trailer axle weights, and we know what the weight of our trailer is.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what you can do. Now, if we want to find out a little bit more detailed information, we can do that too, which is really a good idea, but it just requires a little bit more math, okay? So it's the same process, but instead of putting the truck on scale number 1 and the trailer on scale number 2, if our truck and trailer combination is long enough, there's usually 3 or 4 platforms.
Okay.
So what we can do is we can find out what's going on the rear axle of that truck to make sure it's okay too. So you can do the truck, do it the way I said the first way. That's the easy way, the simplest math way. But the second way is when you pull up on the scale with the truck and the trailer, put the front axle on scale number 1, put the rear axle of the truck on scale number 2, and the trailer axles on scale number 3. All right?
Okay.
Now you have, like you said, you're going to have to do a little bit of extra math because you have to add up the 2 truck axles, right? Does that make sense? To get the total truck weight. Because there is, like we talked about, there are dynamics that happen when you attach that trailer, and there is weight that can either be offloaded or loaded onto the truck when we attach the front axle of the truck. Most of it goes on the rear axle, but there can be some changes. So you need to add both of those up to get the hitched truck weight. Then do the same thing again for the truck, except again, put the front axle on scale 1, rear axle on scale 2, add those up, and now you have you have your total truck weight.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Then you can just do your subtraction to get your tongue weight.
Yeah, and it's giving you more accurate measurement of like what's happening to your truck as it's loaded, right?
Absolutely.
Versus
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. It gives you that rear axle, because that's the one we're most concerned about when we're talking about towing, because all that tongue weight or pin weight is going on the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And while we have dynamics and we can deal with those, that we do want to know
That
what's going on with that.
measurement can kind of help you like adjust how you're loading your trailer, right?
Yep,
Because you
it
don't
can.
want all the weight on the front for the pin. You want it like distributed correctly so you only have the correct amount of weight on that second axle.
That's right. That's good. Yes, absolutely right. So we want to make sure that we have enough for trailer sway, especially for conventional trailers.
Yeah.
Right. But we don't, if it's really high, then we can adjust some of that weight and load our trailer a little bit differently. Take some of that tongue weight off, move some of that weight back, and the further we move it back, again, we get back to the seesaw and playground
Making
physics.
sure
is
it's
what I call
all
it.
balanced,
You
right?
want to make it balanced. We don't want to have really light tongue weights, because then that's where the sway happens. But we don't want to have too much to overload the back of the truck.
Yeah.
So there are things to understand, and be aware of. This is a big picture kind of a talk about it. There's obviously more details that can get involved with some of those things, but that's what we're trying to get at and be aware of. Now, going back to a few questions ago where we talked about the difference of things that can happen with fifth wheels, when we put that weight either right in front of the rear axle, we're not putting a lot of weight on the front axle, but sometimes we put a little bit, and that's actually not a bad thing. We don't really, when those pin weights are heavier, because it's a fifth wheel. When those pin weights are heavier, they can real quickly offload the front. So we don't want to get that pin, the position of the pin behind that axle too far. Otherwise, we can really start to offload that. And so, depending on the kind of truck that you have, it can take that, but we don't want to do that a lot, right? We don't want to go too far with that.
So what should new RV owners keep in mind when setting up for towing?
Well, again, there's a lot, but there are a number of things, and not to try to sound like it's impossible. It's just we can't cover all of those things. But two of the really big things. One is to keep it level. We're shooting for trying to have that truck and trailer level, right? When the trailer is down nose too much, we have this V down there, and that's not good. And so we'll talk in a minute about hitching, but we really want to try to get things level. The big deal is on that trailer, if it's either nose down too much or nose high too much, then there are some issues that can happen with the hitch. It's not great for the hitch, but more so with the axles of the trailer, because now we're shifting a lot of weight maybe to one axle, the front axle or the rear axle. Too much weight on the front, we overload that front axle on the trailer, or too much nose down. Too much nose high, we can overload the rear axle and not have enough weight on it. We want to try to have it level so that we can use that axle assembly. The axle assembly is really one axle, but this group of axles, they're like a platform. We want to use that platform and distribute that weight as evenly as we possibly can. So getting that trailer as level as possible is really important. We can do that with some of the hitches that we have, especially with the conventional hitches. So if we have a heavier tongue weight, and it's starting to load the back end of that truck a little bit too much, there are they're called weight distribution hitches, all right? And those are great. They equalize the weight on the truck and they help to level the trailer. And when you get to a trailer that's roughly, more than 5,000 pound trailer, we really probably want to have a weight distribution hitch, okay? Because we're starting to get enough weight on that tow vehicle that it's really good to do that. And what a weight distribution hitch does, is it helps to move or restore some of that weight to the front axle from the rear axle. So it uses spring bars, usually. Most of them use spring bars. There are some other ways to do the same thing, but most of them use spring bars or tension. And it kind of lifts up on the back of the truck. Now that's a simplification, right?
Yeah.
probably an oversimplification of it. But it uses that tension and it levels out the truck and shifts some of the weight that's on the rear axle to the front axle and evens that out. And that makes so that we're not driving down with not enough weight on our front axle where we lose that, what we mentioned much earlier in the interview, where maneuverability becomes an issue, right? So we get that front axle weight restored on there and the truck can work better and it can level out the trailer. It can shift a little bit of trailer weight on the trailer axles too, but primarily what it's doing is helping us with the weight that goes on the back of that truck and evening that out on the trailer. Again, with fifth wheels, we don't really see that problem too much, right?
Yeah.
If it's overloading the rear axle, there's not much that can be done. We probably need more truck, right? We're back to that thing where we talked about matching the truck and the trailer. So, so that's kind of what we have to do with that. But the hitching equipment is important. We need to understand that the hitching equipment has ratings too. So it's got two ratings. One is, I call it the horizontal rating. It's called the gross trailer weight rating. That's getting into the details, but it's kind of how much that hitch can move safely in a horizontal direction, how much it can tow, right, or pull. So, so that's one, and that's the main rating on the hitch. But it also has a limit on how much weight can go down on it, and that's called the tongue weight rating or the pin weight rating or vertical load rating, or like I said, there's a lot of terms that can happen for the same thing that we're talking about, right? So it can only take so much weight going down. So we need to make sure that whatever hitch we has enough capacity to be able to bear those two weights, right? And then understand what those hitches do, right? One of them, the ball and the coupler, couple it together. Weight distribution helps with that rear axle weight problems. This is for conventional towing. And then we can also add to that other hitch equipment that you can get to help with sway control. You know, we talked about some of the things already, proper weight distribution, speed, and then lastly, there's some equipment that we can use to help us with sway control. So there's a lot of different kinds, right? There's very simple sway bars that can help with that. There is sway built into weight distribution hitches. So on some of them, you know, they have some extra components in there that help with sway. And then lastly, we're in the newfangled electronic age, right?
Yeah.
And so there's electronic sway control that can be put on and it measures sway and can, you know, with gyroscopes in there, and it can see what's going on and then, you know, adjust the braking and do all kinds of fancy whiz-bangy stuff in a box, right? That's cool. And so all those things are neat and cool, but they can help us with deal with these issues that we encounter. So those are very important. Fifth wheels too. Understanding fifth wheel hitches. Remember again, those fifth wheel hitches are built because RV trailers are built with fifth wheel hitches in mind, right? So the framing of the RV trailer is built with that in mind. So that, again, it's on a platform that helps distribute the weight there. They're a little bit bulkier because it's heavier. It's a heavier pin weight. And so it provides a much more comfortable ride, a much more stable ride for the trailer, the RV trailer. So that's why fifth wheel hitches are great for RV trailers. It provides a more comfortable ride for the people. You can also get some, you know, you can always get something fancier too, right? That has extra comforts built in to deal with the movement back and forth or the movement up and down a little bit. So you can buy those things too, but they have the same ratings. That horizontal trailer weight rating, you know, that handles all the mass back there of the trailer, and then the tongue load or that vertical load that goes on top of the trailer. So we want to be aware of that, and we want to use the proper hitch for the trailer that we're using and the truck that we're using. Whenever we load up our vehicle, it's loaded up and braking distance increases. It can cause component fatigue depending on where it's overloaded. So that could be in the frame. It could be in the frame parts of slides. I've seen a lot of issues where people have put a lot of stuff in a slide room, right? And that poor slide motor can't move that thing in and out, and it puts extra stress on the framing around the slide and it cracks. So we need to be aware of where we're putting things, not overloading certain parts. Overloading is a big deal because we just don't think about it. You know, we get I've already talked about it, right? We just have a mindset, and we don't realize the other thing that I didn't mention before is that a lot of times we think when we think about overload, we think about big items.
Mm-hmm.
We think about the generator or the this or that or the. Well, I haven't added anything. I don't know how many times I've heard that. I haven't added anything, right? Everything has weight.
Mm-hmm.
My socks have weight, right? So everything has weight. Every little bit of thing that we accumulate in that RV goes to the weight of the RV. So we need to be aware of that and understand the accumulation of our stuff. So we've got to be aware of that.
Well, one thing that like really pops to the front of my mind is
Mhm.
I've seen travel trailers with their tanks so full that it teeters back and completely bottoms out the back of the frame. So like just thinking about like that added water and waste weight to the back of your trailer is going to have effect on the rest of your trailer regardless of what you have stored in there.
Right. And that's a big thing. Water is very heavy.
Yeah.
So understanding it's an easy way to actually manage weight because we don't necessarily have to carry, dumping your waste tanks before you travel. We always want to keep a little bit of water in the black tank, right? But from a weight standpoint, we do need to have a little bit in there because it's solid waste. We want to make sure that that doesn't solidify and get hard, right? But you don't always have to carry fresh water. Now, some people, that's a really important thing. So you need to consider that when you're loading your RV. I need to put that much weight, but water's a little over 8 pounds per gallon, right?
Yep.
So, 100 gallons of water, that's 800 pounds, that's a lot of weight, right? So we need to be aware of that. We don't travel with full freshwater tanks. We know how much we need based on how we're traveling. And so we just have enough water to be able to deal with those needs and maybe a little bit of reserve capacity. I know some people that want to have full freshwater tanks wherever they go. That makes them comfortable. By all means do that, but understand that that's part of the cargo capacity of your trailer. So overloading is a big deal we want to be aware of. The other thing is, we kind of hit on this a little bit, is just being honest with what the expectations are. It's such a wonderful adventure and thing to think about RVing. And so we kind of let our dreams get away with this sometimes with what our expectations are. We need to understand, I've already talked about, there are limitations to what these vehicles can do. Understanding how they're built, how they were designed, like we talked about the fifth wheels being designed for fifth wheel hitches, but a lot of things we can overcome with weight distribution hitches on trailers and the sway control devices and managing things properly. All of those things can be overcome. There are simple solutions to them. So we just need to learn about them, understand them, but we need to be honest about what our expectations are and then what the concessions are that have to be made. If you want a big fifth wheel, you're probably going to need a big truck, right? And so I don't want a dual rear wheel truck. They're too big. I don't like them. You know what I mean? Well, then that means you have to have you're going to have a smaller trailer, right? But if you want a bigger truck, you might need that. It all depends on how it all works out. But we need to be honest with those concessions. And then when we get into situations that might not be ideal, the concerns that come up or the issues that can arise, we need to try to deal with those in a proper way. Instead of trying to have Band-Aid fixes, or temporary solutions. Temporary solutions are things that we use to get us off the road into the repair facility or to get us back home sometimes,
Yep.
Those are kinds of things that we want to do. We need to evaluate any kind of changes that we make. As RV owners, we have responsibilities too. The manufacturers have their responsibilities, dealers have their responsibilities, we as owners have our responsibilities. And if we make changes, which we can do, we're free to do that in the country, but there can be consequences as well for those things. So we need to be aware of those consequences. So for example, when we see somebody that doesn't have the best match of truck and trailer, we try to help them manage it and we try to give them some suggestions. We try not to say, well, you just need to go buy a new truck.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's really the only solution, depending on how bad the situation is. But a lot of times people will try to adjust with different things. Let me just give one big example that people will go to and to try to help people understand that that's not really a solution, right? One is that people will try to say, well, can I just put airbags on the back of the truck to help it? And that sounds like a great idea. There's nothing wrong with airbags. Airbags are a great thing, but we need to understand what they do and what they don't do. So the big thing that they do is they can help level the truck. If it's kind of sitting like this back there, they can help level it, but they don't shift weight. So there's still weight on the back, and they don't increase the capacity of an axle. They don't do that, okay? And so people kind of in their minds, they think, well, I've added more to the suspension, so that's increased the capacity. Doesn't do that, okay? It may make the ride more comfortable and level it out, but it doesn't change the capacity. What in fact it has done is if you've added the airbags, what have you just done to the rear axle? You've added more stuff on there, and that's added more weight to it. Now, granted, it's not a lot of weight, but what you've really done is made it worse, right? So that's one thing. And then we try to do other things too, to try to hold on to our dream of having, this and not that, And so sometimes we just need to honestly evaluate that. If we try to switch our hitch, that's another thing that can happen sometimes, is that people will try to move to a lighter hitch. We need to first of all make sure that the ratings of that hitch work, right? But then if you try to use adapters, or other things, then we need to know what the consequences are for that, because sometimes that can change the dynamics. I mean, the hitch, pin box, and the framing of the trailer all work together to move that RV down the road. And so if we change those significantly, then we can adjust the physics that are going on there and the stresses and how they're dealt with. And so we just want to be careful about when we do that. There are other solutions for those kinds of things that have shown and been proven to work, but there are also some that maybe haven't been proven and that do cause other stresses and that can add to stress on the frame. And that's what we're really worried about, because that's a big repair bill, right? If there are frame problems. So we want to be aware of those stresses and just make sure that we are checking with the manufacturer to make sure that that's something that's allowable or that's okay with them to do, to check and make sure that our ratings are good on any of those equipment, to make sure what that piece of equipment really does, what it accomplishes and what it can do. So all of those things that go to that. So, and then we just need to be aware of the consequences of those things and make wise decisions. What we're trying to do is help people understand their RVs so that they can make wise decisions for the whole purpose of enjoying RVing. We want to make it better for everybody, for the manufacturers, for the dealers, for the RV owners. We've worked mostly with the RV owners because we want to help them. They're the ones that have the least amount of knowledge and want to help them understand that. So that's what we're trying to do and help them do it safely and enjoy the heck out of that RV. I mean, to really get the most fulfillment they can and to see this beautiful country and the creations that are out there.
Just make sure everybody has all the pieces they need to make their dreams very successful and not ever hit the point where it's a nightmare and you have frame cracks and your truck's breaking down and all the
we want to try to do that.
Apart.
I mean, there's only so much you can do, right?
Yeah.
You can just do the best that you can with everything. There's still going to be tire failures no matter what, no matter how good the tire manufacturers do it, no matter how well we take care of them, no matter what the situations are. It's a tough life out there on the road for vehicles, and so, and likewise, they're going to be, our trucks are going to break down sometimes. I mean, I'm breaking down, I'm getting old. You're young, right? And I'm getting old. And so I'm breaking down, you know what I mean? And so the choices that I've made, I'm reaping the consequences of those choices sometimes. But all of those things happen, right? So there is age to everything, and that's part of life. And we need to understand that. But whenever we do different kinds of things, we just want to make sure that we're doing things as wisely as we can, checking out, understanding, making sure we know what's going to happen, and make those with our eyes wide open and know how to manage them and handle them in a proper way. Another piece of equipment that's important for RVers, trailers, owners to understand is brake controllers. Brake controllers are the communication device between the truck and the trailer. They go on the truck, and so they kind of communicate whenever we're pressing the brakes, then the brakes get pressed on the RV trailer. Now, some trucks have these brake controllers built in. That's great. We might need to buy a third-party brake controller if our truck doesn't have one built in. But there are different kinds. You know, we talked about different technology for sway control. Well, there's different technology for just about everything that we do, right? And so likewise with brake controllers, there's some very simple ones. I wouldn't necessarily suggest those most simple ones for RV trailers. What we suggest is some type of a proportional brake controller. And what I mean by that is that if we hit the brakes on the truck hard, then it's going to hit the brakes on the trailer more forcefully. If we hit them lightly or we touch them lightly on the truck, then it will touch them lightly on the trailer. It's in proportion to the amount of force that we put on that brake pedal. Does that make sense? And so there's some different technologies even within those, right? So there's some usually we're talking about a little over $100. You know, it's not that expensive. But the brake controller is a very important piece of equipment that you need to be able to have on your RV as well. It needs to be adjusted and set. But then we have some fancy ones that hook into your OBD2 port and all kinds of electronic gizmos that go with that too. So brake controllers are another important piece of equipment as well.
Trey, thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise and practical advice for RV owners to use for towing.
Well, you're very welcome, Emily, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to come and share with your viewers.
Absolutely. And for our viewers, towing an RV trailer involves more than just hooking up and hitting the road. It's about understanding your equipment, making informed decisions, and prioritizing safety every step of the way. Whether you're a new RV owner or looking to upgrade your setup, remember that education is key. Take the time to learn your vehicle's capabilities, weigh your trailer properly, and never underestimate the importance of preparation. Thanks again to Trey, and safe travels to all.